I came back to Maple Ridge, Kentucky, in early March with 3 months of leave from the Army Corps of Engineers. After years of deployments overseas, the quiet little town felt like another planet. My mother's old house still sat on a tree-lined street with a white porch and a cracked driveway. Nothing had changed on the outside. Inside, though, it felt like someone had pressed pause on a family photo and left it there too long. I was back to help Mom. She's in her late 60s, still sharp but moving slower, and lately she'd been having headaches and sleeping a lot. When I called to tell her I was coming home, she sounded relieved but also distracted. She said Heather, my older sister, was helping her manage things. That was fine with me. Heather and I have always been different, but we used to be close enough to get through holidays without a fight. Walking into the house with my duffel bag, I noticed the faint smell of fresh paint mixed with something metallic. The living room furniture was arranged differently from how Mom liked it. Heather came down the hall in yoga pants and a designer sweatshirt, her hair perfect, like she was headed to brunch. "Welcome home, soldier," she said with a smirk. "We've kept things running." "Thanks," I said, hugging her. She felt stiff, like a coworker instead of a sister. Mom shuffled out from the kitchen, smiling but pale, wearing a thick cardigan even though it was warm inside. She hugged me tightly and said she'd been having headaches again but didn't want to worry me. Heather jumped in before I could respond. "She's fine. We've just been busy with upgrades. Bathroom's been completely redone. New pipes, new fixtures. All high-end stuff." That was odd. Mom hates renovations. I asked, "Upgrades? Why?" Heather waved her hand. "Resale value. You're always gone, so I handled it. Don't worry." I dropped my bag in my old room. The carpet was vacuumed into perfect lines, but the air felt heavier than I remembered. Military habit. I checked the vents automatically. They looked new. The bathroom next to my room was spotless and smelled like chemical cleaner. Over the next few days, I tried to settle in. I woke up at 6 out of habit, made breakfast, and watered Mom's plants. Nobody ate with me. Mom would nibble toast mid-morning. Heather disappeared into her laptop. She said she was working on a project, but I never saw what. One evening, while Mom dozed on the couch, I asked Heather about her job. She gave me a vague answer about consulting gigs and changed the subject to my deployments. She kept pressing me about how it feels to be back, like she was looking for cracks. Mom's headaches worried me more each day. She was forgetting little things, like whether she'd taken her pills. Heather brushed it off. "She's just tired. You know how she gets." I walked around the house checking for anything that could be causing problems. Mold, gas leaks, bad wiring. My Army training taught me that small details matter. In the basement, stacked boxes were neatly labeled in Heather's handwriting. A new lock had been installed on the door to the furnace area. "Why the lock?" I asked at dinner. Heather didn't look up from her phone. "Just keeping things organized. Some of the contractors left tools down there." The smell in the basement stuck with me. Not exactly gas, not exactly paint. Something faint but chemical. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I'd been in worse places overseas. Still, it nagged at me. Mom's room had been updated too. Heather had moved her bed closer to the vent, for better airflow. I noticed the vent cover was newer than the others. Mom said she slept better with it that way, but she also said her headaches started a few months ago. I started keeping notes in a little green notebook I carried from deployment. Dates, times, anything odd. It wasn't paranoia. It was procedure. On the 4th morning, a steady drip echoed from the upstairs bathroom. The faucet had been fine the night before. Now water was seeping through the dining room ceiling, forming a damp spot the size of a hand. I grabbed a bucket and texted Heather. "Leak upstairs." She replied, "Call the plumber. Use the number I sent." Instead of the company that did the renovation, she sent me a new name, Frank Delgado. She claimed he was the best in town. Her tone felt rushed, like she wanted me to follow her instructions without question. I called Frank. His voice was calm, low, and professional. "I can be there in an hour," he said. While waiting, I moved furniture away from the drip and put down towels. Mom was still in her robe, sipping tea, looking dazed. Heather was running errands. Right on time, the doorbell rang. A man in his 50s stood there with a worn toolbox. He was medium build, short graying hair, glasses, and an Old Navy tattoo on his forearm. "Mrs. Cole?" he asked. "I'm Captain Cole," I said, shaking his hand. Call me Miranda. The leak's upstairs. He nodded and followed me in. He moved like someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Up the stairs, quick inspection, then back down. I'll need to check the basement for the main line, he said. Basement's through the kitchen, I told him. Need me to come along? He shook his head. I can handle it. I stayed in the kitchen listening to the faint clink of tools below. The house felt too quiet. Mom had dozed off again. I poured coffee, watching the damp spot on the ceiling. It had stopped dripping. Footsteps on the basement stairs made me look up. Frank appeared in the doorway. His face had lost color. His hands trembled slightly as he set down the toolbox. Find the problem? I asked. He looked at me carefully, then at the stairs. We need to talk. About the leak? It's not exactly a leak, he said. He lowered his voice. You live here with your sister? Yes. And my mother. Why? He leaned closer. Ma'am, what's down there isn't plumbing. Someone installed something in your basement that shouldn't be there. It's tied into your ventilation, directly to the bedrooms. My stomach tightened. What kind of something? I don't know the full details yet. But it's not a purifier. It's not accidental. And whoever put it there knows this house very well. I stared at him. You're saying someone broke in? He shook his head. I don't think it was a stranger. For a second I couldn't breathe. What are you trying to tell me? He looked toward the kitchen window, making sure no one was listening. Have you been feeling unusual fatigue, headaches, trouble sleeping? Yes, I said slowly. But I'm an older soldier. Comes with the territory. And your sister? Your mother? Mom's been sick. Heather seems fine. Frank nodded grimly. That confirms it. You need to listen to me very carefully. Pack your essentials and get out right now. Don't tell your sister where you're going. I gripped the counter. Why? Because someone in this house is trying to harm you, he said quietly. The words hit me harder than any mortar blast overseas. My pulse hammered in my ears. I looked at the basement door. In my mind, I saw my sister smiling at me at the airport when I came home, hugging me like nothing had changed. I heard my mother coughing at night. I thought of the new vents, the headaches, the smell. Frank's voice cut through my thoughts. You need to move fast. We can talk in my truck. I forced myself to nod, feeling like the floor under my boots was tilting. Without another word, I walked toward my room to grab my bag. I tightened my grip on my bag until my knuckles went white, forcing my body to move before my mind could catch up. My boots felt heavier with each step toward my room. The hallway smelled faintly of bleach and something metallic, and the air coming out of the vent seemed warmer than before. I closed the door behind me and knelt by the duffel. Years of packing in a hurry made my hands move automatically. Wallet, phone, IDs, pistol locked in its case, change of clothes, Mom's medical folder. I didn't stop to think about Heather's smile or Mom's cardigan. I just packed. Frank's footsteps paced quietly in the kitchen. I could hear the faint clatter of tools as he pretended to be busy. My heart was pounding like a drum, but my breathing stayed steady from training. On my second trip to the closet, my eyes landed on the little green notebook where I'd been logging oddities. I shoved it into my pocket. I opened the door and stepped into the hall. Mom's door was cracked open. She was asleep, curled on her side, mouth slightly open. Her face looked pale, even in the dim light. Heather still hadn't come back from her errands. Frank met my eyes from the kitchen. His expression said, "Move." I crossed to Mom's room and gently shook her shoulder. "Mom, wake up. We're going to get some air." She stirred but didn't open her eyes fully. "Honey, what's wrong?" "I just need you to come with me." "Where?" "Doesn't matter right now." I kept my voice light. "I want to show you something outside." Frank was already at the back door, glancing toward the driveway. He whispered, "We've got maybe 15 minutes before someone notices." I wrapped Mom's shawl around her shoulders and guided her into the kitchen. "It's a nice day. Let's get some coffee at the diner," I said like it was nothing. She blinked at Frank. "Who's this?" "Plumber," he said with a quick smile. "We're just going to take a little ride." We moved fast, but without looking like we were rushing. Out the back door, across the porch, down the steps. My car was parked under the oak tree. I helped Mom into the passenger seat. Frank followed me to the curb, staying low. "Where do we go?" I asked. "My truck's 2 houses down," he said. "Follow me. Drive normal." I nodded. "You have a safe place?" "Yeah. A shop with cameras. Nobody bothers me there. I started the engine. Mom leaned her head against the window, still drowsy. Frank got into his pickup and pulled out slowly. I fell in behind him. We rolled down Maple Street like nothing was wrong. Every mailbox and trimmed hedge looked sharper than usual. I scanned for Heather's car but didn't see it. The neighborhood was quiet, only a dog barking in the distance. Frank led us out of the subdivision, past the high school and a row of shuttered shops. After 10 minutes, he turned into a gravel lot behind a building that looked like an old auto parts store. He parked near a side door and waved me in. Inside was a large workshop with shelves of pipes, filters, and tools stacked neatly. A pot of coffee sat on a hot plate. Security cameras covered every corner. The air smelled of metal and grease, but nothing chemical. "Put her on the couch," Frank said, pointing to a worn leather sofa. "She can rest there." I helped Mom sit. She looked at me with glassy eyes. "Miranda, what's going on?" I crouched in front of her. "I'm making sure you're safe. Just stay here and drink some water." Frank handed her a bottle. She sipped slowly. I stood and faced him. "All right. Tell me everything." He rubbed his forehead. "Down in your basement, somebody installed a set of pipes and a small tank tied into the HVAC. Looks like a CO source. There's also a secondary canister hooked to a timed valve, some kind of aerosol. I didn't open it all the way, but the setup's clean. This isn't DIY. Can it kill? If run at the right level, yeah. Or at least make someone confused, sleepy, sick. Over time, it could mimic health problems." I felt a chill despite the heater running. "And you're sure it's intentional?" "No one does that by mistake. It's hidden behind a panel and locked. Whoever did it had access and time." My mind went through possibilities like a checklist. Could be a contractor? Maybe. But why pipe it to the bedrooms? The question hung in the air. Frank poured 2 cups of coffee. "I've seen stuff like this once before. Navy housing. Domestic case. Wife tried to knock out her husband with fumes. He survived because the vent was blocked. Ugly mess." I took the cup but didn't drink. "I need evidence. Photos, samples." "Oh, I've already taken some pictures on my phone," he said. "I can get you copies, but if you go back there, you'll be walking into whatever plan's in motion. I can't just disappear. Heather will notice Mom's gone." "She already will," he said. I stared at my mother dozing on the couch. The thought of Heather sitting at the kitchen table right now, scrolling on her phone, maybe waiting for a call from some supplier, made my stomach twist. Frank leaned closer. "You're Army, right? You know how to handle yourself. But this isn't overseas. This is your family." "I know exactly who it is," I said flatly. He studied me for a second. "You're sure?" "Everything lines up. Renovation. Control over Mom. Moving the bed closer to the vent. Headaches. She's setting something up." Frank exhaled. "Then you've got to get law enforcement involved before you confront her. If you go alone, she could flip it on you." I nodded. "Military CID can handle it if a service member's at risk, but they'll need evidence before they get a warrant." "I'll help you collect it," he said. "But we need a plan." I sat on the edge of the workbench, sipping the coffee now just to feel the heat. "First priority is Mom. We keep her here until I'm sure the house is clean. Second is documenting everything. Third is contacting CID quietly." Frank pulled out a legal pad. "Write down every symptom your mother's had. Dates, times. I'll add my notes on the system downstairs. We'll build a timeline." I took the pen and started writing. Headaches since December. Fatigue. Sleep changes. Heather moving bed closer to vent in January. Renovation complete February. Frank added, "New lock on furnace room. Unknown canister. Co-source. Timed valve." We worked in silence for a few minutes, our pens scratching like insects on paper. Mom stirred and asked weakly, "Miranda, what is this place?" "It's just a workshop," I said gently. "We're taking a little break." She closed her eyes again. Frank looked up. "She's still breathing okay, that's good. Levels weren't maxed yet." I gripped the pen tighter. "Heather's not stupid. She'll notice we're gone and either shut it down or accelerate. Then we stay ahead of her," he said. "When she's out, I can go back, take full video, and pull a sample from the canister." "You don't go back alone." "Not yet." I thought about the Army's endless briefings on situational awareness. This wasn't a battlefield, but the principles were the same. Frank's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. Unknown number. Didn't answer. He set it face down. Could be nothing. I watched the screen go dark. Or it could be her checking on you. He met my eyes. Yeah. I stood, stretching my shoulders. The shop's concrete floor felt solid under my boots. I knew exactly what I had to do next, even if the thought made my chest tight. I'm going to make a call, I said quietly. Not to her, to someone who knows what to do. Frank nodded once, like a soldier acknowledging an order. Mom shifted on the couch, breathing slow and steady. The air here smelled of metal and oil, not chemicals. Outside, a truck rumbled by on the road, then faded. I stepped toward the back of the shop, phone in hand, heart steady again, my mind already lining up the next move like pieces on a board that I intended to control. I pressed the phone to my ear and spoke in a calm, clipped tone like I'd done 1,000 times in the field. The duty officer at the military police station on base listened while I gave my name, rank, and the basics. Possible tampering with a residence, threat to a service member, and a vulnerable family member involved. He didn't waste time with small talk. He told me to gather evidence, keep my mother safe, and said CID would reach out directly for a formal statement. The call ended as cleanly as it started. Sliding the phone back into my pocket, I turned to Frank. They're aware. They'll contact me soon. He nodded, pulling a small canvas bag from under the workbench. Then we go get what we need now. Photos, samples, everything. I've got gloves, masks, test tubes, and a GoPro. We're in and out fast. I looked at my mother sleeping on the couch. Her breathing had evened out, color returning to her face. I tucked the shawl tighter around her shoulders and left a note on the table. Back soon, stay resting, lock the door. Then I grabbed my duffel and followed Frank out to the lot. We drove separately, me trailing him again through the quiet streets. The town looked the same, but my view of it had changed. Every mailbox felt like a checkpoint. Every parked car a possible lookout. When we pulled up 2 houses down from mine, I cut the engine and let Frank park first. He stepped out with his bag slung across his shoulder, moving like a man who'd been on missions before. I joined him at the side yard where the hedges were overgrown. He whispered, "Front door or basement?" "Basement," I said. "Less chance of being seen." We crossed the yard quickly. The back door to the basement had a new padlock Heather must have installed after the renovation. I knelt and examined it. Cheap lock. Easy pick. Frank handed me a tension wrench and pick from his bag without a word. 30 seconds later, it clicked open. We slipped inside and shut the door behind us. The basement was dim but smelled stronger now, sweet and chemical, mixed with the earthy scent of concrete. Rows of neatly labeled boxes lined the walls. Heather's handwriting again. Xmas, Mom's photos, kitchen stuff. Frank clicked on a small flashlight with a red filter to keep the light low. He led the way to the furnace room. The new panel covering the HVAC system stood out against the old cinder block wall. It had been painted the same color as the surrounding area, but the edges were too clean. "Here," he murmured. I pulled on gloves while Frank unscrewed the panel. Inside was a network of pipes and small canisters strapped to brackets. A thin hose led up into the main duct feeding the upstairs vents. A digital timer blinked green. Frank aimed the GoPro at it and started recording. "See this?" he said quietly. "Co-source plus aerosol injector. Whoever set this up used professional-grade fittings. Not a handyman job." I leaned closer, reading the labels. The first canister was clearly a CO cylinder with a regulator. The second had no markings, just a metal shell with a timed valve. I could see residue where a cap had been unscrewed recently. "Smell that?" Frank asked. "Yeah, not gas. Something else. Endofrock. Could be chloral hydrate or a sedative mix. Hard to say without a lab." I snapped photos with my phone from every angle. Date, stamps on, flash off. My hands didn't shake. Frank took a swab from the edge of the hose and sealed it in a tube. Sample one. He moved to the timer, scrolling through the settings. "It's set for small doses at night between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., he whispered. My jaw clenched. "That's when Mom's been the sickest." He gave me a sharp look. "And you too?" I wake up groggy. Thought it was just jet lag. We kept working in silence, photographing every joint and wire. Frank found a hidden power strip feeding the timer. He unplugged it carefully. The blinking stopped. "That'll stop the doses for now," he said. "But we can't take the system out yet. We need the cops to see it as is." I checked the stairwell. The house was silent above. No car in the driveway. Frank whispered, "Get shots of the lock, too. Show forced access if needed." I did. Then I pulled my notebook and added a new entry. March 12. Found co-cylinder and aerosol injector in basement furnace room. Timer set 2 to 5 a.m. Photographed, sample taken. Unplugged power. Frank zipped the sample tubes into a pouch. "We're good here. Let's check the upstairs vents before we go. If she's been moving your mother's bed closer, there might be residue there too." We moved up the basement stairs, easing the door open into the kitchen. Afternoon light spilled across the floor. I could hear a faint hum from the fridge, but nothing else. In Mom's room, the vent cover gleamed new against the old wallpaper. I unscrewed it while Frank held the flashlight. Inside, the metal was coated with a faint powder. He swabbed it and sealed the tube. "That's enough for CID to get a warrant," he said. I replaced the cover and wiped the screws clean. "Let's get out." We stepped back into the hallway. A creak on the front porch froze us both. Someone tried the doorknob. Frank moved to the kitchen side door. "We go now," he mouthed. I slid my phone into my pocket, my heart hammering but my face calm. We slipped out the back door into the yard, closing it softly. A car door slammed out front. Heather's voice drifted faintly as she talked to someone on the phone. Frank and I ducked behind the hedges and moved quickly to the street. We reached our vehicles without being seen. Once inside my car, I exhaled slowly. Frank's truck started ahead of me. We rolled out of the neighborhood like two commuters on an ordinary afternoon. 10 minutes later, we were back at his workshop. I parked around back and helped him unload the bag of evidence. Mom was still on the couch, stirring but looking better. Frank set the sample tubes on the workbench. "We've got enough to hand over. I'll back up the footage and photos to a secure drive." I stood over the bench, staring at the canister residue on the swabs. "This is real," I muttered. "It's not just in my head." He glanced at me. "It's real, and it's dangerous. But now you have proof." I nodded once. My training kept my voice level. "We move fast, no tipping her off. Sid will get the warrant. Then we take control." Frank tapped the GoPro. "You want me to make a duplicate card?" "Yes. One for me, one for them." He got to work while I poured water for my mother. She blinked at me, confused but alert. "Where were you?" she asked softly. "Checking on something," I said. "Everything's okay." She sipped and leaned back. Frank handed me a small envelope with the duplicate card. "This stays on you. If anything happens to me, you've got it." I slipped it into my pocket. My pulse was steady again. Pieces of a plan were forming the way they always did before an operation. Frank cleaned his hands with a rag. "Next step. You talk to CID when they call back. Give them everything. Let them set the timeline." End of I looked at the security monitors on his wall, showing live feeds of the workshop exterior. The road outside was empty. The sky had shifted to late afternoon, gray clouds gathering. My mother dozed off again, the water bottle slipping from her hand. I caught it before it fell. Frank said quietly, "She's safe for now." I straightened, scanning the screens again. "For now isn't good enough," I said. My voice came out calm but cold. He met my eyes. "Then let's make it good enough." Alling. The workshop hummed with the low sound of the hot plate and the occasional click of a camera backup finishing. The smell of metal and oil felt solid, like a shield. I stood there with my hand on the envelope, feeling the weight of what we'd uncovered settle into something sharp and clear, already shaping my next move without a word. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel as I pulled out of Frank's lot and headed back toward town, watching the rearview mirror for any car that might linger too long behind me. The world looked normal: pickup trucks at gas stations, kids on bikes, but the normalcy felt like a thin skin over something rotten. My mind ran through protocols: who to notify, where to set up observation, how to protect my mother while locking down evidence. Back at the workshop, Frank stayed busy duplicating files. I couldn't just sit still. I pulled out my phone and opened a secure notes app I'd used on deployments. I started a fresh log: times Heather had been at the house, deliveries she'd signed for, her sudden interest in home improvement projects. I added everything I remembered about her finances: odd calls with loan advisors, the new SUV she somehow leased after quitting her job. The phone vibrated. An unknown number. I answered with my professional tone. "This is Captain Miranda Cole." A man identified himself as Special Agent Hall from Army CID. He'd received my initial report from the MP duty officer. His voice was calm but direct. Do not confront your sister. Keep gathering evidence. We're coordinating with the county sheriff to execute a search. We'll advise when the warrant is signed. Understood? I said. We already have photos, video, and chemical swabs. Good. Send us everything encrypted to this address. He gave me a mill email. And Captain, stay cautious. When suspects sense exposure, they escalate. I ended the call, saved the address, and immediately forwarded the encrypted files from Frank's system. It felt like sliding a loaded weapon across the table to an ally. Frank emerged from the back with 2 travel mugs of coffee. So? They're moving. But we can't tip Heather off. She can't know we've unplugged the device. He handed me a mug. Then you're going back in tonight? I took a sip. No. I'm staying with my mother. I want to see how Heather acts when she thinks nothing's wrong. That evening, as sunset cast the street in orange light, I drove my mother's car back to the house. My uniform blouse and hair bun were gone. I looked like any other woman coming home from errands. My heart stayed steady. Heather's SUV was in the driveway. She was in the kitchen when I walked in, stirring something on the stove like the perfect daughter. Hey, you're finally back, she said brightly. Mom's been asking for you. I kissed Mom's forehead where she sat at the table, then turned to Heather. How's everything here? Fine, she said. Frank done with the plumbing? Yeah, he says it's all set. Heather's smile twitched at the corner, but held. Good, that's a relief. I sat across from her at the table, keeping my tone casual. You've been busy lately. Everything okay with work? She shrugged. Still sorting things out, you know how it is. Mom perked up slightly. Heather, did you pay the credit card bill? They called again. Heather's spoon clinked sharply against the pot. I said I'd handle it. I made a mental note of the tension. I could help you budget, I offered. Heather glanced at me with a quick flash of something anger, fear, then smiled again. I've got it under control. That. As we ate, I observed her the way I'd learned to watch locals on patrol overseas. Tiny cues. How her eyes flicked to the hallway where the basement door was. How she asked if I was sleeping better since coming home. How she refilled Mom's glass but not mine. After dinner, Heather went to her room to make a call. I waited a full minute, then followed softly to the hallway. Through the thin door I could hear her whispering, No, she doesn't suspect. Yes, Frank fixed it. We just have to wait. I stepped back before she opened the door. When she emerged, she nearly jumped seeing me. Oh hey. Just checking the laundry, I said evenly. Need the machine? Nope, she said too fast and brushed past me. Back in my room, I placed a small digital voice recorder under my dresser aimed at the hallway. It wasn't military issue, just a consumer gadget, but it would catch any late-night basement trips. At 2 a.m., I lay awake listening. Footsteps creaked on the stairs. A door opened. Soft metallic sounds from below. My hand hovered over my phone ready to hit record, but then silence returned. The next morning, Mom looked pale again despite sleeping early. Heather breezed in wearing jogging clothes. Going for a run, she said. As soon as the front door shut, I knelt by the vent in Mom's room. The cover was back on, but faint chemical odor still lingered. Heather must have tried to restart the system, but found it dead. I texted Frank. She's checking. Device still unplugged. Mom weak again. He replied, Keep her hydrated. I'm outside if you need me. I pocketed the phone and turned back to Mom, forcing my voice light. Let's get you up for some fresh air. We sat on the porch. The neighborhood looked harmless, dogs on leashes, mail trucks, but my eyes scanned for Heather's SUV returning. Mom reached for my hand. You're acting like you're back on base, she said softly. I squeezed her hand, just making sure we're safe. Her eyes searched mine. Is something wrong with Heather? The question pierced me. She had sensed it too. We'll be okay, I said, which was true enough. Heather's SUV reappeared down the street. I stood, instincts tightening. She jogged up the driveway all smiles. Look at you two enjoying the morning, she said, voice too bright. I smiled back, just as bright. We're thinking of redecorating the basement. Might clear it out this weekend. A flicker of alarm crossed her face before she masked it. Oh, that's a lot of work. Maybe we should wait. Maybe, I said, watching her reaction. Inside, she busied herself making smoothies. I slipped into the hallway and checked my recorder. It had caught clear audio of her whispering the night before. Another file for CID. Frank texted again. Sheriff has warrant. 24 hours max. I typed back. Copy. Holding position. All day I played my role as the unsuspecting sister. Heather hovered around Mom with exaggerated kindness. She offered to make tea, to bring lunch to Mom's room, to handle her medications. Each offer was a possible vector. I politely declined them all and kept control. Late afternoon, as sunlight slanted through the blinds, I felt the weight of my uniform folded in my duffel. Years of service had taught me to act under pressure, but this was my own house, my own blood. I opened the back door where Frank stood, pretending to adjust his toolbox in his truck. We spoke in low voices. Recorder worked, I said. She's nervous. She's making calls. Good. More evidence, he said. Stay cool tonight. They'll move soon. I closed the door and turned to find Heather watching me from the hallway. Talking to Frank again? She asked lightly. He forgot a part yesterday, I said. I told him to come by tomorrow. She nodded slowly, then smiled. Good. We don't need any more leaks. Her words held double meaning, and we both knew it. I guided Mom to the living room and turned on the news loud enough to mask whispers. Heather retreated to her room. My phone buzzed once more. A short update from CID confirming the time window. I put the phone down, heart steady, eyes scanning the house I had grown up in. Every corner, every sound was a data point now. Heather thought she knew the terrain, but so did I. The clock ticked toward evening as I moved through the rooms, checking locks, noting Heather's movements, filing each detail away. My mother dozed on the couch, unaware of the quiet chess match unfolding under her roof. In the kitchen, Heather chopped vegetables with precise strokes, her eyes flicking to me, then back to the cutting board. I rinsed my coffee mug slowly, matching her rhythm. 2 women in a suburban kitchen, but only one of us knew the full stakes of the game being played. I slipped my phone into my pocket and leaned against the kitchen counter, letting Heather's chatter about dinner fade into background noise. My eyes were on the clock, but my mind was on the digital recorder in my room, the swabs in Frank's workshop, and the encrypted files sitting on CID's servers. The puzzle pieces were in place. Now I needed the picture to come into focus. When Heather went upstairs to take a shower, I quietly guided Mom to the porch again. Frank's truck was parked at the curb like a neighbor visiting. I waved him over. She's getting bolder, I said under my breath. Last night she was in the basement at 2 a.m. The recorder caught her whispering to someone on the phone. Frank kept his face neutral. You've got audio? Yes. Clear enough to recognize her voice. I'll forward it tonight. He shifted his toolbox to one hand. We can dig deeper on her finances. I've got a friend at a credit union who can legally pull public liens and judgments. Nothing shady, just what's already on record. I nodded. Do it. Frank returned to his truck. I stayed with Mom, pointing out birds on the feeder to keep her distracted. Heather's silhouette passed by her upstairs window. An hour later, when she left to run errands, I acted. Mom, let's take a quick drive, I said. Fresh air will help. She agreed, and we drove to Frank's workshop where she could nap on the recliner. While she slept, Frank opened his laptop and spun it toward me. Pulled what I could, he said. Heather took out 2 personal loans last year, $30,000 each at high interest. She's behind on both. She also maxed out 3 credit cards. Her new SUV is a lease she's already missed payments on. I stared at the screen. Motives everywhere. That's not all, he added, scrolling. She set up an LLC called Evergreen Home Solutions. Claimed to be a contractor. Collected deposits from at least 4 homeowners for remodeling projects. Never finished them, now they're suing her. She's drowning in debt and lawsuits. I let out a slow breath. She saw Mom's assets as the lifeline. Frank clicked open another tab. And look at this, 2 months ago she ordered industrial tubing and canisters from an HVAC supply company in Cincinnati. Same brand as the system we found. My training kicked in. Chain of custody, I said. We can tie the shipments to her credit card. He nodded. Already downloaded invoices. Time-stamped, with her name and address. And crossed. I leaned back, processing. Heather hadn't just stumbled into a bad idea. She'd planned a full operation to bleed our mother slowly and inherit everything under a veil of natural illness. Frank poured coffee for us both. What's your next move? Keep her calm while the warrant gets signed, I said. If she panics, she might try something desperate. I forwarded the audio recording from the night before to the CID email. Then I wrote a short, factual note. Suspect observed at residence at 0200 accessing basement. Audio attached. Frank set down his mug. We can also check her car. If she's been hauling chemicals, residue might be in the trunk. She keeps it locked, I said. He smiled slightly. Locks are suggestions. We left Mom sleeping and walked outside to Heather's SUV parked at the curb. Frank knelt by the rear fender, attaching a small magnetic tracker. Just in case she bolts, he murmured. Then he pulled a thin glove over his hand and tried the back hatch. Unlocked. Inside was a tarp, 2 heavy-duty gloves, and a small cooler. Frank snapped photos and closed it gently. Could be nothing. Could be everything. I straightened up. We'll let Sid swab it. Back inside, Mom stirred and asked for tea. I made it while Frank emailed the new photos. Heather's pattern was becoming clear. Financial collapse, chemical purchases, nighttime trips to the basement, whispers about timing. I crouched next to Mom's recliner. Do you feel safe here for a while? She touched my cheek. I feel safe with you. I swallowed hard. Good. Frank handed me a flash drive. Everything we've got so far. Keep it on you. I slipped it into my pocket next to the envelope with the GoPro card. 2 layers of insurance. That evening I drove Mom back to the house. Heather was already home, smiling too wide. Where have you two been all day? She asked lightly. Doctor's appointment, I said smoothly. Routine checkup for Mom. Heather's smile faltered but returned. Good idea. We settled in for dinner. I watched her closely. She served Mom's plate first, then mine. I discreetly swapped the plates when she turned away. Heather didn't notice. During the meal, she launched into small talk about redecorating the living room, about maybe selling the house someday. Mom nodded vaguely, too tired to follow. I kept my voice casual. Selling the house? Interesting idea. Just thinking out loud, Heather said. It's too much for Mom to handle. I took a slow sip of water, hiding the ice in my tone. We'll cross that bridge later. After dinner, I excused myself to the bathroom but went straight to Heather's room. Her purse was on the dresser. Inside, I found a prepaid phone, the kind that leaves no contract trail. I snapped a quick photo and put it back exactly. In the hallway, I heard Heather talking to someone on her main phone. She's acting weird. We might have to switch plans. I stepped into the guest room and wrote another secure note. Heather discussing switch plans on phone at 2000. Back in the living room, I sat beside Mom, holding her hand as she drifted off. Heather passed behind us, carrying a laundry basket to the basement. I watched her go. My heart beat slow and steady. Frank's text popped up. Tracker active. SUV moved last night at 3 a.m. for 20 minutes. Returned. I typed back. Copy. Upstairs, water ran in Heather's bathroom but stopped quickly. She moved around her room, then silence. I opened my laptop on the coffee table, pulling up the invoices from Evergreen Home Solutions. Photos of empty job sites, angry homeowners on a message board calling her a thief. Heather had built a whole false business as cover. Mom stirred. You're working late, she murmured. Just emails, I said gently. Heather reappeared in the doorway. I'm heading out for a bit, she said. Need anything? We're fine, I replied. She left, door closing behind her. The SUV engine started. Through the window, I saw it roll down the street. Frank texted immediately. She's on the move, heading towards storage units off Highway 16. I replied, follow but stay back. I'm staying with Mom. While Mom slept, I walked the perimeter of the house, checking every lock. My boots were silent on the hardwood floor. I looked at the basement door, remembering the canisters hidden behind the furnace. My training kept my breathing slow. Heather thought she was invisible. She thought no one was watching. But every move now was a data point, every slip another nail in the case. Mom shifted in her sleep, whispering my name. I sat next to her and brushed her hair back, the simple gesture grounding me. Outside, a car passed slowly, then sped up. I noted the time. Another data point. My phone buzzed again. Frank's update with a photo of Heather at a storage unit, carrying a box marked Home Supplies. I saved it, added it to the secure folder, and deleted the message thread. The living room smelled of tea and the faint chemical residue from the vents. I opened a window an inch to clear the air. As I sat there, my mind sorted the facts like a battlefield map. Heather's debts, her LLC scam, her purchases, her covert installations, her late-night basement runs, her whispered calls about switching plans. I felt no panic now, only a clear, cold focus. Protect Mom. Maintain cover. Let CID close the trap. Heather's headlights swept across the window as she returned. I closed the laptop and smiled as she walked in, empty-handed this time. Storage run? I asked lightly. Just dropping off old stuff, she said, eyes flicking to Mom. I rose to get her a glass of water, hiding the evidence of my work. She took it, thanked me, and went upstairs. I sat back down next to Mom, watching the house settle into silence again. The evidence was stacked higher every hour. Heather's mask was cracking, and behind it was desperation. The night deepened, the air cooled, and my focus sharpened even more. The pieces of the puzzle were not just falling into place, they were locking in. I sat in the dim living room with the window cracked open, the night air brushing my face while Mom slept on the couch. My phone vibrated again. Frank's update with a screenshot from the tracker. Heather's SUV parked at a 24-hour diner near the edge of town. The caption read, "Meeting someone." I typed back, "Hold visual but don't approach." Slipping the phone into my pocket, I rose and walked quietly to the kitchen. The house smelled faintly of bleach. I checked the trash can. An empty bottle of heavy-duty cleaner sat on top. Heather had tried to wipe something. Mom stirred, whispering my name. I knelt by her side. "Go back to sleep, Mom. Everything's fine." She squeezed my hand weakly. "Be careful." I tucked a blanket around her shoulders and headed to the hallway. Heather's door was open, lights off. I stepped inside. Her laptop sat on the desk. I plugged in a small USB key Frank had given me. It ran a script that copied her recent files to a hidden folder in seconds. When it finished, I pocketed the key and straightened the chair exactly where it had been. Downstairs, I checked the basement door. Locked again, new padlock. Heather had replaced it since we'd unplugged the system. The lock was shinier than the old one. She was trying to regain control. My phone buzzed Frank again. "She's with a man. 40 seconds, leather jacket, talking in the parking lot. Past a brown envelope." I exhaled slowly. "Loan shark or supplier?" I muttered to myself. Frank sent another message. "Returning to your neighborhood now. ETA 15 minutes. I glanced at the clock. I had to be in position when she came back. I pulled on my jacket and stepped onto the porch. The street was empty under the glow of a single lamppost. I scanned the hedges, the parked cars, the quiet houses. Everything felt like an ambush site, but I stayed loose. 5 minutes later, headlights swung into the driveway. Heather's SUV rolled to a stop. She sat behind the wheel for a moment, talking on her phone, then got out carrying a small duffel bag. Her face looked pale even in the streetlight. "Late night," I said evenly from the porch. She jumped slightly. "Didn't see you there," she said, forcing a smile. "I needed some air." "What's in the bag?" "Just papers from storage," she replied too quickly. "Old bills." I nodded. "I was thinking we could go through Mom's old files together tomorrow. Help her get organized." Heather's smile flickered. "Sure. Tomorrow." She went inside, clutching the bag. I followed, closing the door behind us. In the kitchen, she set the bag on the counter and began making tea. Her hands trembled slightly. "You're still up," she said lightly. "I like to keep an eye on things," I said. "Old army habit." She laughed without humor. "You always were the watchdog." I opened the fridge and poured water, keeping my voice casual. "Mom's been better lately. Maybe the house needs some fresh air." Heather stirred her tea. "She's old, Miranda. People get sick. It's natural." "True," I said, watching her eyes. "But some things aren't natural." For a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. Then Heather took her mug and went upstairs. When I heard her door close, I opened the duffel bag. Inside were folders, 2 prepaid phones, and a small plastic case with syringes. My stomach tightened, but my face stayed blank. I snapped photos of everything with my phone, zipped the bag, and put it back exactly. At dawn, Frank texted, "Got the files off her laptop. Invoices, emails, shipment confirmations, smoking gun. I replied, "Good. Sheriff?" He wrote back, "Warrant signed. Execution window today." I stood at the kitchen sink watching sunlight creep across the counter. Mom stirred on the couch, looking weak but smiling when she saw me. Heather came downstairs wearing yoga pants and a hoodie, acting like a normal sister making breakfast. She poured juice for Mom and slid a glass toward me. "You look tired," she said sweetly. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. "Too much on my mind." Heather sat across from me. "You know, Miranda, you've always thought you're the strong one, the hero, but sometimes you need to relax and let someone else take care of things." I sipped my water. And sometimes taking care of things means making hard choices. Our eyes locked for a moment. Then she smiled again, bright and false. "I'm going to the store. Need anything?" I shook my head. After she left, Frank came through the back door with 2 deputies in plain clothes. They carried concealed holsters and clipboards. "We're staging at the corner," Frank said. "As soon as she comes back with the car, they'll move in." I guided Mom to her bedroom and told her gently to stay put. She was too weak to ask many questions. From the kitchen window, I watched the street. The deputies took up positions down the block, looking like joggers checking their phones. Frank sat at the table with me, laying out the timeline. "She's already nervous," he said quietly. "Might try something sooner?" "Let her," I said. "We're ready." An hour later, Heather's SUV pulled into the driveway. She sat in the driver's seat for a long time looking at the house. Then she stepped out holding a grocery bag. Frank squeezed my arm. "Here we go." Heather walked in with a big smile. "Got your favorite muffins, Mom?" she called out. I took the bag from her and set it on the counter. "That's nice of you." She looked at me, eyes narrowing. "Where's Mom?" "Resting." Heather reached for the bag, but I blocked her hand. "I'll serve these," I said evenly. Something flickered across her face. Anger, calculation. She stepped back. "Fine." Frank's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and gave a subtle nod. The deputies were in position. I opened the grocery bag. Inside were muffins on top, but beneath them a small bottle of clear liquid wrapped in paper towels. I tilted it just enough for Frank to see. Heather's smile froze. "You're acting weird, Miranda." "Am I?" I asked, sliding the bag toward the sink. "What's this?" "Flavoring," she said quickly. Frank moved to the doorway. "Miss Cole, we need to ask you a few questions," he said calmly. Heather blinked. "Who are you?" "County Sheriff's Office," he said, showing a badge. "We have a warrant." Her eyes darted to the back door, then to the stairs where Mom was resting. "You can't just—" "Yes, we can," Frank said firmly. "Step away from the counter." She backed up slowly, hands trembling. "This is a mistake." I stayed where I was, my tone level. "Then you'll have nothing to worry about." Heather glanced at me, then at the bag with the bottle. For a second, I thought she might lunge for it. Instead, she forced a laugh. "This is insane." Frank gestured toward the living room. "Please sit down." Heather obeyed, sinking into the chair. The deputies entered from the front door quietly, one of them holding a document folder. I exhaled slowly, steady as a rock. My mother slept upstairs, unaware that the walls of her house were closing on the danger inside. Heather stared at me across the table, her face pale and hard. The air felt heavy, but my focus stayed sharp. The game she'd been playing in secret was no longer hers to control. Heather sat at the table with her hands folded like a model citizen. The 2 plainclothes deputies posted at the edges of the living room, pretending to look at their phones. Frank stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, every inch of him a wall. I leaned on the counter, my eyes on Heather, speaking in the same calm, level voice I'd used with insurgents in Afghanistan. "You're free to answer their questions," I said. "Nobody's accusing you yet." She gave a sharp laugh. "Oh, come on, Miranda, this is ridiculous. You bring strangers into Mom's house and treat me like a criminal?" I shrugged slightly. "If everything's fine, the warrant clears you." Her eyes flicked to the back door. She was calculating distances. I recognized the look. One deputy stepped forward. "Miss Cole, we're here to collect certain items described in the warrant. Please stay seated while we do that." Heather forced a smile. "Of course. I've got nothing to hide." The other deputy headed for the basement door with a small camera bag. Frank handed him gloves. Heather's gaze tracked them. What's in the basement? She asked, voice high. Just routine inspection, the deputy said. Heather's face tightened. There's nothing down there but junk. Then it won't take long, Frank said. I crossed the room and sat opposite her. You've been under a lot of stress lately, I said quietly. Loans, lawsuits, the business trouble. You could have asked for help. Her lips pressed together. You don't know what you're talking about. I know enough. I saw the invoices, the tubing, the canisters. Heather's eyes went wide. You went through my stuff? I protected Mom, I said simply. That's my job. For a moment, pure fury flashed across her face. Then she slumped back in the chair and covered her eyes with her hands, breathing hard. You've always wanted to ruin me, she muttered. No, I said. I wanted to save you from yourself. Footsteps on the basement stairs. The deputy emerged holding 2 canisters in evidence bags, found attached to the HVAC system exactly as described. Heather dropped her hands and stared at the bags. That's not mine, she said weakly. Those must have been there from the contractors. End of text. Frank raised an eyebrow. With your credit card receipts taped to them? She shot him a look that could cut glass. You're a plumber, not a cop. Stay out of this. I spoke evenly. He's the reason Mom's still alive. Heather looked from me to Frank to the deputies, her breathing quickening. She switched tactics, her voice softening. Miranda, please. You're making a huge mistake. You're tired from deployment. You're paranoid. You're imagining things. I didn't blink. Sid has the files, the photos, and now physical evidence. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm your sister. Yes, I said quietly. That's why you're still breathing. The deputy laid the canisters on the table, photographing each. The other one bagged the duffel with the syringes and prepaid phones. Heather reached across the table suddenly, grabbing my wrist with surprising strength. Miranda, stop this, she hissed. You're destroying our family. I pried her fingers off calmly. You already did. She sagged back in the chair, eyes darting around the room. Then she whispered, You don't understand, Michael, and stopped herself. I narrowed my eyes. What about Michael? She clamped her mouth shut. Frank glanced at me. She's hiding something else. I nodded. We'll find it. The deputies moved to the hallway to photograph Heather's laptop and purse. Heather took the opportunity to lean closer to me, voice low and sharp. If you tell them everything, Mom will find out about things you don't want her to know. You think you're the hero, but you're not. I stared at her steadily. Empty threats don't work on me. Her lips curled in a cold smile. We'll see. The deputy returned with the laptop. Miranda, can you confirm this is hers? Yes, I said. Heather snapped. That's private. Not anymore. Frank said. The house was quiet, except for the clicking of the camera shutter and Mom's soft breathing upstairs. Outside, a car rolled past slowly, then sped up. Heather shifted again, her voice turning honey-sweet. Miranda, you're still tired from overseas. This isn't you. You're letting these people fill your head. Come upstairs with me, we can talk. Just the 2 of us. I smiled faintly. That's not going to happen. Her mask cracked. Then you're going to regret this. That. The deputy at the table looked up sharply. Miss Cole, is that a threat? She laughed harshly. No, just a prediction. Frank's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and then at me. Sid team inbound. I folded my hands on the table. Heather, this is your chance to be honest. She leaned forward, eyes glittering. You think you're safe because you wear a uniform. You're not. You think Mom will thank you when she finds out what you've been doing behind her back. She won't. She'll hate you. I met her gaze without flinching. If that's the price for keeping her alive, so be it. Her face twisted. You self-righteous. She stopped herself, breathing hard. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Mom was awake. Heather instantly straightened, plastering on a smile. Hi, Mom, she called sweetly. We're just chatting down here. I stood and moved to the bottom of the stairs. It's okay, Mom, stay in bed. Heather's voice turned pleading again. See? She's confused. She doesn't even know what's happening. You're traumatizing her. I turned back to her. Stop performing. It's over. She slumped, looking small for the first time. Then she whispered, You don't know who you're dealing with. Frank stepped closer, voice low. Miss Cole, remain seated. Her head snapped up, eyes cold now. Don't touch me. No one's touching you, Frank said. We're just making sure everyone stays safe. That. One deputy quietly handcuffed the duffel bag to his own wrist to prevent tampering. The other finished photographing the canisters. Heather suddenly smiled again, slow and strange. You're all so sure you've won. I spoke quietly but firmly. This isn't a game. She tilted her head, eyes shining. For you, maybe. The room felt heavy with unspoken things. My training told me she was on the edge of making a move. Confession, flight, or violence. I shifted my stance subtly, weight on the balls of my feet. Heather noticed and smirked. Still the soldier. Still alive, I said. Footsteps approached from outside. Through the window, I saw CID vehicles pulling up, blue windbreakers with yellow letters. Heather followed my gaze and stiffened. You called the army on your own sister, she said flatly. I called the army to protect my mother, I corrected. She laughed again, a brittle sound. You really think Mom will forgive you when she sees me in handcuffs? I didn't answer. The deputies opened the door for the arriving agents. Heather sat very still, eyes flicking between me and the hallway. She looked like someone deciding which wall to run into. I kept my tone even. Stay seated. The agents entered briskly, greeting the deputies and showing paperwork. Heather watched them like a cornered animal. One agent asked me quietly, Captain Cole, are there any weapons in the house? None I haven't secured, I replied. He nodded. We'll take it from here. I stepped back, my eyes never leaving Heather. She sat perfectly still, her smile frozen, but her hands gripped the chair so hard her knuckles whitened. Mom called faintly from upstairs. I turned my head just enough to say, It's okay, Mom. The agents moved efficiently, their presence filling the house with controlled authority. Heather's eyes darted to the kitchen counter where the grocery bags still Saturday. She exhaled slowly and lowered her gaze. I stood there, steady, every sense alert, knowing the real danger often comes in the moment just before control is established. The smell of tea and bleach hung in the air. The ticking of the wall clock seemed louder than it was. Heather's breathing matched it, quick and shallow. Without a word, I shifted my stance again, ready for whatever she chose next. The agents moved through the house with practiced quiet, cataloging every room while Heather sat rigid in her chair. Her eyes stayed on me like a hawk's, but she didn't speak. The deputies had stepped aside to let the CID team take the lead. Frank stayed at the kitchen counter, phone in his hand, watching everything with the stillness of someone who'd done this before. I walked toward the stairs. Mom, stay in your room for now, I called up gently. It's just a home inspection. I tit. Her voice floated back down, confused but trusting. All right, honey. I returned to the kitchen. The lead agent, a tall man with clipped hair, showed me his tablet. We're setting up covert surveillance, he murmured. We'll give her enough rope. You stay with your mother. When she moves, we'll have it all on video. I nodded once. We can use Frank's hidden cameras. He already placed one behind the furnace panel last week. Frank tapped his screen. Live feet up, he said quietly. Motion alerts enabled. The agent smiled faintly. Good thinking. Heather's gaze darted between us. This is insane, she said louder now. You're all out of your minds. There's nothing to see here. The agent ignored her, issuing quick instructions to his team. One agent slipped a pinhole camera into the hallway vent. Another placed an audio recorder under the kitchen counter. Everything happened so smoothly it felt like choreography. I poured water and set the glass in front of Heather. Drink. You look pale. She glared but sipped. You can't just invade someone's house like this. Yes, they can, I said evenly. It's called probable cause. Her knuckles whitened around the glass. You think you're clever? I think I'm thorough. The agents finished setting the devices and filed out, leaving two plainclothes officers across the street in an unmarked SUV. Frank closed his laptop. We're live now. Anything she does, we see. I sat at the table across from Heather, keeping my tone casual. What's for dinner tonight? She gave me a thin smile. Why? Afraid to eat my cooking? Just making conversation. Hours ticked by with the slow tension of a standoff. Heather moved around the kitchen, opening cabinets, texting on her phone. I stayed with Mom, helping her sip water, brushing her hair back when she felt dizzy. Every so often, Frank would glance at his phone and nod, confirming the cameras were still streaming. As dusk settled over the street, Heather's demeanor changed. She became unusually affectionate, bringing tea for Mom, offering to do laundry, humming as she moved. She even tried to engage me in small talk about my army unit. "Do you ever think about quitting?" she asked softly while folding a towel. I raised an eyebrow. "Quitting what?" "The army. The constant vigilance. You could start a new life. Be free of all that." "I like my life," I said simply, "and vigilance keeps people alive." "And for me." She looked at me for a long moment, then smiled again and went downstairs. Frank's phone buzzed immediately. "She's in the basement," he murmured. "Camera shows her messing with the canisters." I slipped into the hallway, heart steady. "Is the timer reconnected?" "Yes." "She's adjusting something. Record everything." Through the floorboards, I heard faint metallic clinks. Mom was dozing again. I moved to the basement door but didn't open it. We needed her to incriminate herself fully. Frank whispered, "She's opening the second canister. Tilting it. Looks like she's checking the valve." The lead agent's voice came softly through my earpiece from the unmarked SUV outside. "Captain Cole, maintain position. We're capturing live evidence." I took a slow breath and stayed still. Minutes passed. Heather came back up the stairs carrying a folded blanket. She smiled sweetly. "Mom might be cold," she said, draping it over the back of the couch. "Thanks," I said evenly. She glanced at me. "You're awfully quiet." "Just thinking." Heather poured herself wine and sat at the table, scrolling her phone. Her eyes flicked to me, then to the basement door. Frank texted me discreetly. "Valve set to full release tonight, 0200. I typed back under the table. "Copy." We went through the motions of a normal evening. TV murmuring in the background, Heather pretending to read, me helping Mom with soup. But under the surface, everything had shifted. Later, when Heather retreated to her room, Frank showed me the live feed from the furnace camera. It clearly captured her hands adjusting the regulator and resetting the timer. The date and timestamps glowed at the bottom of the frame. "That's the nail in the coffin," Frank said quietly. "She can't explain this away." I looked at the screen, my expression unreadable. "Good." We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the faint creaks of the house. Then I stood and closed Mom's bedroom door gently so she could sleep undisturbed. Downstairs, Heather emerged from her room again, this time carrying a small black bag. She opened the back door and stepped outside. Frank signaled from the window. "She's heading to her car." I slipped out the front door and moved along the side of the house, staying in the shadows like I'd been trained. Across the street, the unmarked SUV's headlights blinked once ready. Heather opened her SUV trunk, glancing over her shoulder. She placed the black bag inside and pulled out a phone, speaking in a low voice. Frank whispered over the line, "Camera mic picking up. Valve ready, tonight's the night." I exhaled quietly. That was the last piece. Heather closed the trunk and turned to go back inside. I stepped from the shadows deliberately, making sure she saw me. "Late night errands again?" I asked evenly. She froze, then forced a smile. "Just checking something in the car." "Looks like you're packing," I said. Her eyes flicked to the street. "You're following me now?" "I live here," I said. Hard not to notice. For a moment she looked like she might bolt. But instead she walked past me back to the house. Inside, I locked the door behind her. She raised an eyebrow. "Paranoid much?" "Just cautious." She set her phone on the counter and poured more wine, her hands trembling. "You always think you're the smartest person in the room." "No," I said. "Just the most prepared." Frank slipped in from the porch, nodding subtly. "Everything's recorded." Heather shot him a glare. "You again." "Me again," he said evenly. I guided Mom upstairs, whispering reassurance while she half-dozed. Downstairs, Heather sat at the table, sipping her wine, eyes fixed on the basement door. Frank checked his phone and showed me the feed one more time. Clear video of Heather resetting the deadly system. Clear audio of her whispering the plan. I looked at him and nodded once. The house felt strangely calm, like the still moment before a storm hits full force. Heather's wine glass trembled in her hand. The cameras hummed quietly. Mom breathed softly upstairs. I stood at the kitchen counter, steady as a rock, every sense alive. The trap she'd built was now her own, and the evidence had been gathered with the precision of a field operation. Heather looked up at me suddenly, her voice low and bitter. "You think you've won, don't you?" I met her gaze without blinking. I think Mom's going to be safe. Her lips pressed together. She turned back to her wine, shoulders tight. Frank slipped the phone into his pocket and leaned against the doorframe, a silent sentinel. The ticking clock in the kitchen was the only sound. Heather sipped, stared at the basement door again, and I watched her without a word, my focus clear, my breathing steady, the weight of the moment settling over the room like a closing net. Frank's phone vibrated again at the counter, the screen flashing a location alert from the tracker. He glanced at it, then handed it to me without a word. Heather's SUV had just left the driveway and was heading toward the industrial park outside town. The timestamp glowed on the screen. I slipped my jacket on and gave Frank a crisp nod. "Stay with Mom," I murmured. "I'll follow at a distance," he said. Unmarked SUVs already tailing her. I took my own car and merged onto the dark highway, headlights cutting through the empty road. The CID agent's voice came over my earpiece. "Captain Cole, she's stopping at Unit 14, Blue Ridge Storage. We have a perimeter. Do not approach until we signal." "Copy," I said calmly. The industrial park was a grid of corrugated metal buildings and chain-link fences. Sodium lights buzzed overhead, casting long orange shadows. I parked 2 lots over and moved on foot, blending into the dim edges like I'd done on countless patrols. From behind a stack of pallets I saw Heather's SUV. The hatch was open. She was pulling out boxes and stacking them by the roll-up door of a storage unit. A man in a leather jacket, same one Frank had spotted, stood beside her, talking low and urgent. I touched my earpiece. "Visual confirmed," I whispered. The agent replied, "Hold. We're moving in." Heather handed the man a small envelope. He counted bills under the light. She glanced around nervously, eyes sweeping the shadows. I crouched lower behind the pallets, heart steady. Every instinct told me to act, but I waited for the signal. Through the earpiece. "Go." "No." In one fluid motion, 2 unmarked vehicles rolled up, headlights flaring, agents poured out, weapons low but ready. "Federal agents," one barked. "Hands where we can see them." The man in the leather jacket dropped the envelope and raised his hands. Heather spun, eyes wide, caught mid-sentence. "What is this?" she cried. I stepped from behind the pallets and approached slowly, my badge clipped to my belt. "It's over, Heather." She stared at me, shock turning to fury. You did this?" "You did this," I said evenly. "We just watched." 2 agents cuffed the man and led him to a vehicle. Heather backed toward the storage unit, hands half raised. "I haven't done anything," she shouted. The lead agent held up a printout of the warrant. "We have probable cause for storage unit 14. Step aside." Heather clutched the doorframe. "This is illegal." "Step aside," the agent repeated. I stood a few feet away, my voice low but clear. "Don't make it worse, Heather." Her eyes darted between me and the agents. "Miranda, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You've been poisoning our mother." She flinched like I'd struck her. "No, I was just trying to—" She cut herself off. "Trying to what?" I asked. She looked around wildly, then said, "I just wanted to slow her down, get her to sign the papers." The agents froze. "Repeat that?" one said. Heather's shoulders slumped. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she said, voice breaking. "I just needed time. The debts were crushing me. I thought if she felt weak, she'd let me handle her accounts." I kept my voice steady. "You installed lethal gas and sedatives. That's not time. That's attempted murder." Tears streamed down her face. "It wasn't supposed to kill her, just make her sleep. I thought I could control it." "Like you controlled your fake business?" I asked. She shook her head frantically. "You always looked down on me. You had the army, the medals. I had nothing. I just wanted a chance." The lead agent gestured to 2 others. "Take her." They moved in, cuffing her hands behind her back. She didn't resist but kept her eyes on me, pleading. "Miranda, please, we're sisters." I met her gaze without blinking. "And Mom is our mother." As they led her toward the unmarked SUV, she twisted to shout, "You'll regret this." The door closed on her words. The agent turned to me. "We'll finish clearing the unit. Do you want to see what's inside?" "Yes," I said quietly. They rolled up the door. Inside were shelves of chemicals, HVAC parts, invoices, and a small journal with Heather's handwriting. Photographs of our mother's bedroom vents. diagrams of the basement, timelines scribbled in pencil. Frank arrived, breath visible in the cold night air. He looked past me into the unit. "Looks like she was setting up a whole operation," he muttered. One agent bagged the journal. "This is plenty for the DA." I stepped inside, scanning the rows. Everything matched the evidence we'd already gathered, but even more explicit. On one page of the journal, Heather had written, "Night doses. Increase gradually. Paperwork signed by April." Frank exhaled slowly. She left a confession in her own handwriting. I nodded. "It's over." The lead agent closed the unit and sealed it with an evidence tag. "Captain Cole, thank you for your cooperation. We'll handle transport and booking. You should return to your mother." I looked at the SUV where Heather sat in the back seat, head bowed. The woman who'd braided my hair before my first school dance now looked like any other suspect. My training kept my face neutral, but inside there was a hollow ache. Frank touched my arm gently. "Let's go." We walked back to my car in silence. The sodium lights buzzed overhead, and somewhere a dog barked. My boots crunched on the gravel. Each step measured. At the car, Frank said quietly, "You did what you had to do." I unlocked the door. "We're not done until Mom's safe." He nodded. "She will be." We drove separately back through the sleeping town. Storefronts dark, streetlights casting cones of light on empty sidewalks. The familiar roads looked alien now, like I was seeing them from a different life. When I reached the house, the deputies stationed there gave a thumbs up. Mom was still asleep upstairs, the TV murmuring softly. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it for a moment, exhaling. Frank followed me in, setting his keys on the counter. "CID's going to hold her overnight and arraign her in the morning. The DA's office is already on it." I nodded. "Good." We sat at the table. The kitchen felt both exactly the same and completely changed. Same clock ticking, same smell of tea, but the tension had shifted into something quieter, heavier. Frank poured water for both of us. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said, though my throat was tight. "Mom's safe. That's all that matters." Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Mom appeared at the top of the stairs, holding the railing. "Miranda?" she asked softly. I stood, forcing a calm smile. "Everything's okay, Mom. Just rest." She nodded slowly and went back to her room. Frank stared at the table. "You know, most people wouldn't have handled this as cleanly." I gave a small, humorless laugh. "Training helps." He raised his glass. "To your training." I didn't raise mine. I was already thinking of the next steps, new locks, new air filters, moving Mom somewhere safer. But for the first time in months, the house felt like it was breathing clean air again. Frank leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. "You want me to stay tonight?" I looked around the kitchen, at the basement door, at the dark windows. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Stay." He nodded. "Then we'll keep watch." We sat there for a while in the quiet house. The only sound, the slow, even breathing of my mother upstairs and the faint hum of the fridge. The storm had broken, but the air was still charged, like static before a second strike. I rested my hand on the table, palm flat, grounding myself. The evidence was sealed, the suspect in custody, but my focus stayed sharp. I wasn't going to let anything slip now. Morning light filtered through the kitchen blinds, a pale stripe across the table where Frank and I Saturday. The house felt hollow, without Heather moving through it. Mom slept upstairs, her breathing steady. I stared at the mug in my hands, knowing the day ahead would strip away the last illusions. Frank's phone buzzed. "They've already searched the SUV and storage unit," he said, scanning the message. "Journal, chemicals, invoices, all bagged and tagged. DA says the evidence is airtight." "Hap." I nodded once. "Good. She won't slip through." I called the hospital and arranged a full checkup for Mom, including blood tests. The doctor's office confirmed what I suspected. Elevated CO levels and traces of sedative compounds. Documented, time-stamped, chain of custody intact. Another nail in the case. By midday, CID invited me downtown to observe the formal booking. Frank stayed with Mom while deputies rotated shifts at the house. I drove to the county building, my uniform blouse crisp again, hair pulled back. The badge at the front desk scanned me through. Heather sat in a small interview room, cuffed, eyes red-rimmed but defiant. A public defender hovered at her shoulder. The lead agent greeted me quietly. "We're recording. You can sit in, but don't engage unless asked." Ender 4. I stood behind the glass as they read her rights again and laid out the evidence one piece at a time. The canisters photographed in place, the invoices with her signature, the journal entries, the audio of her whispering "tonight's the night" while adjusting the valve. Heather's face changed as each piece landed. First denial, then brittle laughter, then silence. When they played the audio of her saying, "I just wanted her to sign the papers," she sagged forward and covered her eyes. The agent's voice stayed calm. "Miss Cole attempted murder with a chemical agent, elder abuse, and fraud. Do you wish to make a statement?" She whispered something to her lawyer, then looked up at me through the glass. "Miranda, please," she said, her voice cracking. "Tell them I never meant to kill her." I held her gaze but didn't move. The agent waited. Heather finally muttered, "I want a deal." The lawyer tried to speak for her, but the agent cut him off. "Any cooperation must go through the DA. Right now we're charging on the evidence we have." They led her out of the room toward holding. As she passed the glass, she stared at me, a mixture of rage and despair. I stayed still, training, keeping my face unreadable. Back at the house that evening, Frank had already arranged for a locksmith and an HVAC company to purge the system. Mom sat in the recliner with a blanket, sipping soup. Her color looked better. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. "Yes," I said, crouching next to her. "The house is clean. You're safe now." She squeezed my hand. "Heather?" "She's with some people who are going to help sort things out," I said gently. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the full truth. Over the next weeks, the case moved fast. CID coordinated with the county DA, weaving the evidence into a tight narrative. The chemical analysis came back confirming CO and a sedative compound in the canisters. Bank records showed Heather's debts, the fake business, and payments to the man in the leather jacket identified as a supplier of restricted materials. I gave sworn statements to both CID and the DA. Frank testified about his discovery of the system. Even the HVAC company provided receipts showing Heather ordered parts under her LLC name. The chain of custody was flawless. The arraignment drew local media. Headlines framed it as, "Sister Poison Plot Foiled by Army Officer." I ignored them. My focus stayed on Mom, who was recovering slowly with fresh air, good food, and no more hidden toxins in her home. The trial opened 6 weeks later in the county courthouse. I sat behind the prosecution table with Frank and Mom's victim advocate. Heather entered in a gray jumpsuit, hair tied back, eyes scanning the room. When she saw Mom sitting with a blanket draped over her knees, she looked away quickly. The prosecutor laid out the case with military precision. Motive, means, opportunity. They projected photos of the basement system, invoices with Heather's signature, the journal pages, the audio recordings. Jurors shifted in their seats as the timeline unfolded from slow poisoning to planned accident. Heather's attorney tried to argue she'd only intended to create a health scare to gain control of finances, but the chemical evidence undercut that claim. Expert witnesses from the state lab explained lethal doses and exposure times. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand in uniform and swore the oath. My voice stayed steady as I described coming home on leave, noticing the strange smell, calling Frank, finding the system, and moving Mom to safety. I didn't embellish, I didn't speculate. Just facts. The defense tried to rattle me. "Isn't it true, Captain Cole, that you were under stress from deployment and might have misinterpreted what you saw?" "No," I said simply. "I photographed it. We have samples." The lab confirmed it. There's no misinterpretation. They moved on quickly. Frank testified next, laying out the technical details of the system and how it could deliver carbon monoxide and aerosol sedatives through the vents. The jury leaned forward as he explained valves, regulators, and timers in plain English. When the prosecution rested, Heather's attorney called no witnesses. She declined to testify. The courtroom felt heavy with unspoken things. Closing arguments were brief. The prosecutor reminded jurors of the chain of evidence and Heather's own words. The defense pleaded for leniency, painting her as desperate, not murderous. The jury deliberated only 3 hours before returning with guilty verdicts on all major counts: attempted murder with a chemical agent, elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. At sentencing 2 weeks later, the judge spoke directly to Heather. You betrayed the trust of your family in a calculated, dangerous manner. This court sentences you to 25 years in state prison. Heather stood expressionless, hands clasped in front of her. She didn't look at me or Mom as deputies led her away. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. I shielded Mom with my arm and guided her to Frank's truck. We drove away without answering a word. Back at the house, the new HVAC system hummed cleanly. The locksmith had changed every lock. Sunlight poured through the open windows. Mom sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea, her hands steady now. You saved me, she said softly. I shook my head. Frank did. CID did. I just paid attention. She smiled faintly. Still the soldier. Frank leaned against the counter. Still alive, he said with a small grin. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The house smelled like coffee and fresh paint, not chemicals. For the first time in months, the tension between my shoulder blades eased. Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You did the right thing, she said. I squeezed back, feeling the weight of everything we'd survived settle into something solid. Frank looked at me. What now? I glanced around the kitchen, the clean vents, the sunlight, my mother's safe. Now we rebuild, I said quietly. We sat together in the warm kitchen. No cameras, no whispering vents, no hidden timers. Just 3 people breathing the same clean air, the sound of Mom's teaspoon against her cup, and the faint hum of a refrigerator in a house that was ours again. The next morning started with the sound of waves instead of the hiss of a furnace. Salt air came through the open window, a soft breeze moving the curtains in the small condo I'd rented on Florida's Gulf Coast. Mom sat on the balcony wrapped in a light sweater, a mug of tea in her hands. She looked 10 years younger already. I poured myself coffee in the tiny kitchen, the counter still bare because we hadn't unpacked much yet. No photos of Heather here, no trace of Maple Ridge. The condo smelled like fresh paint and ocean, not bleach and chemicals. Mom called softly, "Come sit with me." I stepped onto the balcony. The sunlight bounced off the water, bright and relentless. Seagulls squabbled over something on the sand. For a moment, it was just quiet. "How's your breathing?" I asked. She took a deep inhale and smiled. "No headaches, no fog. I can taste my tea again." I leaned on the railing. "Good. That's all I wanted." Frank had flown down the night before to help with the move. He came out onto the balcony now holding a paper bag of pastries from a cafe down the street. "Florida's got its perks," he said. "I could get used to this." I smiled faintly. "Don't get too comfortable. You still have a business to run back home." He shrugged. "I can fly back and forth. I owe you both more than a few days of heavy lifting." We ate quietly for a while. Mom watched the waves. Frank scrolled through his phone, checking on work orders. I sat there feeling my shoulders drop a little more with each passing minute. Later, I drove Mom to a local clinic for a follow-up. The doctor, a no-nonsense woman with short gray hair, reviewed Mom's lab results and nodded. "Levels are normalizing. Another month and she'll be fully clear." She looked at me. "You did the right thing getting her out when you did." Back at the condo, boxes filled the living room. Frank had already assembled the new recliner and was hooking up Mom's TV. She sat in the kitchen peeling oranges, humming softly. I took my laptop to the small dining table and opened an email from my commanding officer. "Captain Cole," it began. "Your extended leave has been approved. We also received your proposal to develop a safety and vigilance module for our engineering units. We'd like you to present it at the next training rotation." I stared at the screen for a moment. The idea had come to me during the trial. Use what happened as a case study, not the details of my sister's crime, but the principles of situational awareness, home safety, and chemical hazards. Soldiers could benefit from it, civilians too. Frank looked over my shoulder. "What's that?" "Work," I said. "They want me to build a new training module." He nodded. "You're not one to sit still." "No," I said. "But this isn't about staying busy. It's about making sure something good comes from all this." He handed me a screwdriver. "Here, if you're going to keep talking like that, at least help me put this bookshelf together." I laughed a short, real laugh I hadn't heard from myself in months, and knelt beside him. We worked in silence, the kind of silence that felt safe. By sunset, The condo looked like a home. Mom's chair faced the water. A small stack of my army manuals sat on the new bookshelf. Frank had even fixed the balcony door so it slid open without sticking. We sat outside again as the sky turned orange. Mom dozed in her chair. Frank leaned on the railing. I sipped cold coffee and watched a fishing boat cut across the horizon. "She's going to be okay," Frank said quietly. "I know," I said. I wasn't sure for a while, but now I know. He glanced at me. "And you?" I thought about it. The past months felt like a long dark tunnel, but I could see daylight now. "I'll be okay too. Eventually." He nodded. "You did what you had to do." I looked at my hands resting on the balcony rail. "I did what was right. It didn't feel like a choice." He smiled faintly. "That's why you're good at your job." We stayed there as the sun dropped lower, the water turning the color of copper. A pelican skimmed the surface. Mom stirred and murmured something in her sleep. I took a deep breath, the air salty and clean. For months I'd been breathing poison without knowing. Now every lungful felt like proof of survival. Later that night, after Mom went to bed, I sat at the dining table drafting the outline for the training module. Personal safety and home vigilance for military families. I listed topics: recognizing subtle hazards, documenting evidence, acting decisively. No melodrama, just practical steps. Soldiers would understand that. Frank came over with 2 mugs of tea. "Still working?" "Just starting something new," I said. He sat across from me. "You know, you don't have to turn everything into a mission." I looked at him. "It's not a mission. It's a lesson plan. If one person spots something off and acts before it's too late, it's worth it." He nodded slowly. "Then it's a good plan." We sat in companionable silence, the only sound the soft hum of the fridge. I typed a few more lines, saved the document, and closed the laptop. When I finally went out to the balcony again, the night sky was full of stars. The ocean was a dark mass moving against the shore. I wrapped my arms around myself and let the breeze wash over me. This place wasn't a hideout. It wasn't exile. It was a starting point. Mom would heal. I would return to duty with a new program that might keep others safe. Frank would go back to his work but remain a friend. What Heather had done would always be part of my history, but it didn't have to define my future. I'd acted, protected, documented, and survived. That was the story now. I went back inside, checked on Mom one last time, and turned off the lights. The condo settled into quiet. Outside, the waves kept rolling in, steady and endless, like breathing.